Ahead of Star Wars Outlaws' release at the end of next month, we recently spent 4 hours or so hands-on with the game to see how Ubisoft Massive's open-world space adventure was really shaping up. Ubisoft hasn't been shy about showing off its latest foray into the Star Wars universe, the last time nearly 20 years ago, but many questions remain about the gameplay, the size of the open-world maps, and so much more. Fear not folks, because we have your back. Here are 7 things you might not know about Star Wars Outlaws ahead of its August 30th launch. Star Wars Outlaws is broken down into many different facets when it comes to the environments. You have the cities and more linear sections, which house a lot of the main missions, as well as a handful of large open world maps, 5 in total, including Tashara, Tatooine, Akiva and 2 others. Recently, creative director Julian Geraghty was quoted as saying it will take around 4 or 5 minutes non-stop to traverse from one side of Tashara to the other, prompting fan concerns about the relative size of Star Wars Outlaws' open world segments. Well folks, let me tell you this, that quote doesn't really do justice to the size of Outlaws' open world maps, and after spending more than a few hours whizzing around Tashara itself, there are 2 points to note regarding Geraghty's comments. Firstly, that a 4 or 5 minute journey seems to be if you're going as the crow flies from border to border, and yes, you can take the speeder off-road with no speed penalties at all. And secondly, the speeder is incredibly fast. So, while there might be a concern about how big Star Wars Outlaws' open world sections really are, based on our experience with Tashara, these concerns are unfounded. Now, on the other hand, if you did decide to run from one side of the map to the other on foot, you might just make it before the next Star Wars film comes out, if you set off on Outlaws' launch day. Luckily, that should never be the case because you can whistle for your speeder wherever you may be, just like summoning a horse in Red Dead Redemption 2. Who's a good buddy? The open world seems to be fairly alive too, with traders who have set up camps, large installations that presumably have a quest tied to them, and even smaller settlements where you can offer your 2 cents to anyone who's willing to listen. What that means in the long term for these kind of decisions, well, only time will tell. Star Wars Outlaws is shaping up to have something for everyone, from the missions you pick up to the minute-to-minute gameplay. When it comes to Outlaws, variety is very much the spice of life. From a mission perspective, Star Wars Outlaws offers more traditional main missions and side missions that come in the form of Syndicate quests, more on that shortly, but on top of that there's a ton of intel to chase down and leads that will open up gameplay opportunities. For instance, like the time we followed a lead that took us to a secret sabacc parlour where we could partake in a card game or 2. Intel seems to be a big part of Outlaws, and various info can lead to hidden treasure, grant gambling tips, and assist you with whatever mission you're on. Whether it's a syndicate quest, a personal request for a vendor, or a contract you pick up from an information broker, there's plenty to keep players occupied. There are even open world events too, like the pirate raid we encountered, where we followed an Imperial shuttle to a pirate camp and liberated them of their supplies. So yeah, a lot of different things to keep you occupied in terms of variety. And that's before we even mention Outlaws' gameplay. From all-out assault, stealth, aggressive stealth, dogfighting in space, whizzing around on your speeder, wandering around cities, parkouring around the galaxy and more, the major selling point of Outlaws to us is how much it tries to do to mix up the gameplay. Speaking of Syndicates, one of Star Wars Outlaws' coolest mechanics is its Syndicate system, which has protagonist Kay Vess carrying out jobs for various factions from planet to planet. It's the heartbeat of everything you do in the game. The beauty of this is that, based on our pretty extensive hands-on, it seems almost impossible to keep all of the Syndicates happy, which only adds to the possibility of tension. Every action has a negative and positive consequence with some of the game's Syndicates. If you want to keep the Hutt's cartel happy at the expense of the Crimson Dawn, for instance, that's easy enough. But if you want to keep both the Pike Syndicate and the Hutt cartel happy at the same time, that might not be so easy. One specific example involved a syndicate mission for the Hutt cartel called Sabotage, wherein we were tasked with stealing information from a Pike stronghold for Jabba's gang of grifters. Easy, right? However, at the end of said mission, out of nowhere, we were approached by a Sullustan Crimson Dawn member by the name of Monda, who offered us a choice. Give up the stolen data to them and double-cross the Hutts, or face his and the Crimson Dawn's wrath. So, out of nowhere, in a mission involving the Hutts and the Pikes, the Crimson Dawn gets dragged into the situation. Yes folks, choice and consequence is rife in Star Wars Outlaws. The advantages in keeping certain Syndicate suite is that not only will you be able to access certain wares at their Syndicate stores, but you'll also get unfettered access to their heavily guarded areas within the large cities like Kijimi and Mirogana. This will allow you to compete contracts from brokers who ask you to head into certain Syndicate's territory and perform some tasks with relative ease, which will improve relations with said Syndicate who you took the contract from, and net you some valuable rewards in the process. Even outside of the narrative, maintaining good relations with your preferred Syndicates is beneficial, especially if you want to access that Syndicate's rewards, contracts and merchants. What isn't so apparent with Star Wars Outlaws is that it's very much a heist game. Kay and Nix are in some serious hot water, and in order to get out of it, they need one big final payday. Yes, Star Wars Outlaws is a big old heist game in which you travel across the galaxy recruiting associates/experts to help score that one final score. Now, this is where things get really interesting, and that's because with each of the associates you recruit, whether it's the mechanic CeeLo Rover, the slicer Ayla Bren, or the bartender Bram, each of them will have permanent perk bonuses that you can unlock that will turn Kay into the ultimate space badass. For instance, Bram's abilities include an armoured undershirt granting Kay more health, an attack melee combo, the ability to fake a surrender to buy you more time if you get caught somewhere you shouldn't be, as well as unlocking personal requests from merchants. Meanwhile, Ayla Bren's ability includes sneak shots, concussive smoke grenade upgrades, the ability to set traps and alarms, and more. Each recruit has 6 different perks or abilities to unlock, and based on the in-game expert screen, it looks like there are 8 different experts to recruit in all. That means that there are 48 possible permanent upgrades for Kay that you can unlock. You unlock these by performing specific in-game tasks, like visiting new vendors, finding certain materials, and using specific abilities. Once you've met the criteria for the ability, that ability is yours. This level of customization and depth when it comes to Kay doesn't include the fact that you can also seek out new jackets, belts, pants, blaster upgrades and speed upgrades for her too, meaning you can truly lean into the best aspects of your own personal playstyle. Plus, you can look stylish while doing it. And yes, you can get new skins for Nix too. One of the things we noticed very early on in our previous Star Wars Outlaws previews and gameplay demos is that the game seemed to hinge a lot on stealth. Well, thankfully, if you're not a stealth fan, aside from a few forced stealth scenarios which can get a little grating, how you play the game is entirely up to you. During the Relic mission, for instance, a mission we saw last month where a Ubisoft massive rep snuck into the Wellspring on Kijimi completely unseen and turned off the alarm and stole the Ashiga clan relic. However, when we got to that mission in our hands-on, to be contrary, we ran into the main area and just started opening fire to see what would happen. As it turns out, it's a perfectly viable and acceptable strategy if you so wish. So if stealth isn't your bag, don't worry too much. It's not just a case of to stealth or not to stealth when it comes to Star Wars Outlaws either. In fact, most situations we encountered had multiple ways to approach them, whether that's to bribe someone to get through a door, heading through a vent to gain access to an area via a hidden back door, or just wandering into an area because you're in good stead with the local faction. The choice and consequence from the Syndicates extends much further into the gameplay too. If you've seen any Star Wars Outlaws footage so far, you might be a little suspect with the level of challenge on offer. Case in point is the mission False Flag, where Kay has to escape from a large Imperial space station. In that demo we saw Kay enter into the large docking bay on the space station and fight a couple of enemies at a time with explosive barrels conveniently dotted around. That seemed kind of easy. Once you get out into the open world, however, things are actually going to get a lot trickier for you. Thanks to alarm systems in bases, a wanted system that runs throughout the galaxy, and the ability for the Empire or whichever syndicate you're battling with to call in seemingly endless waves of support, it's safe to say that Star Wars Outlaws can get a little tricky at times if you're not careful, especially if you have to deal with shield guards, blaster goons and speeders rocking up out of nowhere all at once. If you thought Star Wars Outlaws was going to be a cakewalk, think again. The beauty of this early on is that it means you'll have to lean a little more into the game's RPG mechanics. Dying quickly, then seek out some Course Weave and Iron Weave to unlock Kay's armoured undershirt from Bram's expert abilities. Need some extra speed or the ability to jump on the speeder? Then Silo Rovat's expert abilities have you covered there. And the same goes when looking to bag better gear too, especially those with certain perks attached to them. My point is, Star Wars Outlaws can get a little tough if you're sticking it to the man being the Empire in this case. The best way to approach the game we found is aggressive stealth. Sneak into an encampment, silently take out the lookouts and make your way through the area, disabling or setting traps on all the alarms as you go. Then, when all the alarms have been disabled, you can absolutely whip out your blaster and go to town on those Imperial scum or opposing Syndicate scumbacks, whoever you're fighting. Heck, you can even pick up the A300 blaster rifle that guards will drop too, and make quick work of anyone who gets in your way. Last and by no means least, if you want to play some classic Star Wars minigames and earn a few credits while doing it, you absolutely can in Star Wars Outlaws. Dotted around Miragana and Kijimi were various chances to try a hand at Canto Fathia Racing, a hologram horse racing style minigame, and Sabak, the classic Star Wars card game. And yes, you can even bet your hard-earned credits on them too. In fact, to go one better, throughout Star Wars Outlaws open world are various data tablets that you can find, and on some of them you'll find tips for upcoming Canto Fathia racings, and the like. This tip for instance could say, my bookie says the smallest Fathia is definitely going to win, and she's never been wrong before. And you know what? They're right. So, not only can you gamble to your heart's content, you can also game the system for free credits. And who said earning credits in the farthest reaches of space had to be shady? Not us. That's for sure.
I was right!
It's over!
There you have it folks, 7 things you might not know about Star Wars Outlaws that you now know, ahead of its August 30th launch for Xbox Series X, S, PlayStation 5 and PC. And it's coming to you in a galaxy not so far away.